Before we like wrap up that, I wanted to ask your recommendations for anybody interested in what you do, like how you became a therapist and everything.
So do you want me to go to the basics of how I became a therapist, or are you talking more EMDR?
Probably just a therapist, yeah, like schooling and stuff.
Okay, so I am a licensed clinical social worker. And so for the state of New York, that meant that you have to get your master's degree. And so that's your MSW in, a school that's like qualified and all of that good stuff. And so when you come out with your MSW of grad school, which usually for most of us, I would say is 6 years. Some people, if they go the faster route where they do BSW to MSW, they can cut down a semester or two. So sometimes it's a little closer to 5 years of schooling. But you get out with your MSW and essentially have to license, which then makes you an LMSW. And in New York State at this point, you still have to have 3 years of clinical experience under supervised, supervision with either clinical social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, who else? Sometimes, I don't know. I want to say those are the main 3. We'll just keep it safe for that. So you have to have 3 years where you get enough client contact, which last I knew, I believe is over 2,400 hours, somewhere around there. It's over 2,000, I think. And then you also have to have over 100, I can't remember exactly, over 100 hours though of supervision. And then once you have that, you're able to go test for your clinical license, which then people become LCSWs in the state of New York. So that is your licensed clinical social worker. And what has just recently changed, my initials are LCSW-R. So in New York State, the R was really 3 more years of experience, clinically, more supervision, but basically sending all of that paperwork into the state for them to grant you what we call the R privilege. So the R privilege was really for insurance, payment, and claims to be able to bill and do all of that stuff. Recently, just the beginning of this year, they have rescinded the R for New York State right now, essentially just making it so that once you get your LCSW, there's not necessarily anything else to be able to do in that aspect. But as far as like therapists too, there's also mental health counselors. So you can go and be a licensed mental health counselor. Those are master's level programs. And marriage and family therapists, those are master's level programs. So people get licensed marriage family therapists. Psychologists, usually to be a clinical psychologist, working whether privately or with an agency clinically, are usually doctorate programs. So those are some of the basics of.
Yeah, this is all super interesting, so I'm sure at least somebody would be interested to maybe do what you do. Cool. And then is there any like resources that I can just pass along for people? I know before we started recording, you mentioned a book, so any like books or whatever else that you read, listen to?
There's one book that I recommend a lot to, and it's actually a newer book. It is called What Happened to You, and it's by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. If you like to listen to books, I also recommend that's a good listen because they have some dialogue back and forth, so it makes it an interesting listen. I'm trying to think. I'm currently reading Mindsight, which is also a really good book. If people are just introducing themselves to different things, the Body Keeps the Score is also a good one, but I will say that that one is heavier at different times. Um, and if you were going to do one versus the other to start with, if you've never read anything, I would start with what happened to you. And then I would go into The Body Keeps the Score and Mindsight, or, whatever, if some of these things really interest
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, cool. That's a good thing to mention too, because I know this really is pretty heavy, especially if you have, the history of it. So
mhm.
I'm so thankful that you came on and talked about this stuff. I know that my questions are kind of general and vague and hard to answer, but I hope that you like talking about it because I really like listening.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
love sharing. I think anybody having more of an understanding about this is so helpful, because not only I think is it helpful for us individually, it helps us to make sense of our own stuff, maybe our own suffering, but it
Mhm.
helps us to make sense and be able to heal in different ways when we make sense of things too. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I mean, anytime if you ever want me to come back with different topics or whatever, I'd love
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, that sounds
So
great. I really would like to talk about more of these things in depth. So if anybody has any questions who's listening too, let me know and I can direct them and maybe we can make an episode of just questions. But yeah, thank you for coming and thank you everybody for listening. I'll have all of the resources, the things that we talked about, and all of that good stuff in the show notes and on social media. So I'll catch you in the next one.